Noah Carter smirked as he tossed his Rolex onto the towering pile of designer watches and expensive accessories on his friend's penthouse coffee table. 3 months, no money, no credit cards. No connections, he said, meeting the amused eyes of his best friend Ryan. And when I win, I want that Ferrari you've been hiding in your garage. Ryan chuckled, swirling his whiskey. And if you lose, Noah leaned back, his confidence unwavering, then I'll admit you were right that I can't survive without my fortune. He'd spent his entire life wrapped in luxury. The heir to Carter Enterprises, he'd never set foot in a grocery store, let alone struggled to make ends meet. But he was tired of the predictability, of people only seeing his wealth. He wanted to know if he could exist beyond it. So, with nothing but the clothes on his back and a worn-out duffel bag, Noah stepped out onto the bustling streets of New York, leaving behind the world of private jets and Michelin star dinners. By the 3rd week, Noah was exhausted. He'd managed to pick up odd jobs bartending, moving furniture, even washing dishes in a dingy diner, but none of it paid enough to keep him off the streets. He slept in shelters when he could, park benches when he couldn't. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to struggle, and then he met her. Sophie Hayes. She found him behind the cafe where she worked, sitting on the cold pavement, rubbing his hands together for warmth. "Hey," she said, crouching down. "You waiting for someone or just enjoying the view of the dumpster?" He looked up, startled. She had soft brown eyes, a ponytail that barely tamed her wild waves, and a smudge of flour on her cheek. He hesitated, feeling strangely embarrassed, just catching my breath. She tilted her head, studying him. "You don't look like you belong here," she said bluntly. Noah smirked, his usual arrogance kicking in. "And where do I look like I belong?" She crossed her arms. "Somewhere with silk sheets and a butler." His smirk faltered. "Guess I don't belong anywhere right now." Sophie's expression softened. Without another word, she reached into her bag and handed him a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. His pride screamed at him to refuse, but his stomach won the battle. "Thanks," he murmured. She shrugged. "You look like you could use a break." And that was how it started. Sophie didn't ask questions. She didn't pry into why a guy with expensive-looking shoes but a beaten-down expression was struggling to afford food. She just offered him work. "You can wash dishes here," she said the next day, tossing an apron at him as she wiped down the cafe counter. "It's not glamorous, but it beats starving." Noah didn't hesitate. He scrubbed, swept, carried crates, anything to keep himself from sinking further. And Sophie, she was everywhere. Smiling at customers, kneading dough, arguing with the ancient espresso machine as if it were a stubborn child. She fascinated him. "Why are you helping me?" he asked one evening as they sat outside after closing, sharing a plate of leftover pastries. Sophie shrugged, biting into a croissant. "Because I know what it's like to have nothing," he frowned. "You," she laughed. "Yeah, shocking, right? My dad walked out when I was 10 and my mom worked 3 jobs to keep the lights on. I learned early on that the world doesn't hand out favors." Noah stared at her, something shifting in his chest. She wasn't like anyone he'd ever met. She wasn't impressed by wealth, she didn't even know he had any. She saw him for who he was now, not for the fortune he'd left behind. And for the first time in his life, Noah didn't feel like just another millionaire's son. Weeks passed. The bet, the money, the life he'd left behind, it all started to feel like a distant memory. He and Sophie became inseparable. They worked side by side, laughed over burnt cookies, argued about the best way to make coffee. She challenged him, teased him, made him feel alive in a way he never had before. One evening, as they walked along the pier, the city lights reflecting off the water, Noah found himself watching her instead of the skyline. "You ever think about leaving this place?" he asked, hands in his pockets. Sophie chuckled. "All the time, but dreams don't pay rent." His chest tightened. If she knew who he really was, she wouldn't have to worry about rent ever again. But telling her the truth meant risking everything. So he stayed silent. And then, without thinking, he reached for her hand. She looked up, surprised, but she didn't pull away, and just like that, the bet didn't matter anymore. Because Noah Carter, millionaire, heir, and former playboy, was falling in love. Noah wasn't sure when it happened. Maybe it was the way Sophie scrunched her nose when she concentrated, or how she hummed absent-mindedly while kneading dough. Maybe it was the way she treated everyone with kindness, never asking for anything in return. All he knew was that every time she smiled, every time she laughed, every time she looked at him like he was just Noah, not a billionaire's son, not a man playing a dangerous game, but just a guy trying to figure things out, he fell a little harder. And it terrified him. He had told himself this was temporary, that he was only here for a few months proving a point. But with each passing day, the thought of leaving felt less like an inevitability and more like a betrayal. Sophie had no idea who he really was. And the longer he stayed, the harder it became to tell her. One evening, after a long shift at the cafe, they sat side by side on the back steps, sipping coffee. The air was thick with the scent of roasted beans and warm bread. Sophie exhaled, stretching her legs. "I swear if one more customer asks for just a little oat milk and then complains it's too much, I'm going to lose it." Noah grinned. "You love it, though." She gave him a sidelong glance. "Love is a strong word." He nudged her shoulder. "Yeah, what would you do if you weren't running this place?" She hesitated, staring down at her cup. "I'd open my own bakery, a real one. Not just a cafe with a half-working oven, but a place where people come just for the pastries. Somewhere I can create whatever I want instead of serving what sells." Noah leaned back, watching her. "So why don't you?" She let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. "Because dreams require money, and I barely make enough to keep this place running, let alone start something new." A sharp pang of guilt hit him. He could make her dream come true in an instant. One phone call, one check, and she'd never have to worry about struggling again. But if she knew the truth, would she still look at him like this? He swallowed hard. "You'll get there," he said instead. "You're too stubborn not to," she smiled, nudging him back. "Yeah, well, maybe one day you'll figure out what you want too." He wanted her. But wanting her meant telling her the truth. And telling her the truth meant risking everything. That night, he barely slept, torn between the life he had left behind and the life he was building with her. The decision was made for him the next morning. Noah had just finished restocking the shelves when the bell above the door chimed. He glanced up, expecting a customer, but his stomach dropped when he saw who it was. Ryan. Dressed in an expensive suit, looking completely out of place in the small cafe, Ryan smirked as he approached. "Well, well, look at you. Dish soap really brings out your eyes." Noah set down the crate he was holding, every muscle tensing. "What the hell are you doing here?" Ryan shrugged. "It's been 3 months." The words hit him like a punch. 3 months, the deadline for the bet. He had been so caught up in Sophie in this life that he had forgotten. Ryan leaned against the counter. "I have to say I'm impressed. I thought you'd cave after a week, but you did it. You proved your point." Noah's jaw clenched. "What do you want?" Ryan smirked. "To take you home. The game's over." Before Noah could respond, Sophie stepped out from the back, wiping her hands on a towel. "Hey, Noah, do you?" She stopped, eyes flickering between them. "Who's this?" Ryan raised an eyebrow. "She doesn't know, does she?" Noah's stomach twisted, Sophie's brows furrowed. "Know what?" Ryan let out a low chuckle. "Oh, this is going to be good." Noah took a step forward. "Ryan, don't." But it was too late. Ryan turned to Sophie, amusement dancing in his eyes. "Your friend here isn't who you think he is. He's not some down-on-his-luck guy trying to make ends meet. He's Noah Carter, as in Carter Enterprises, billionaire, heir, and this." He gestured around the cafe. This was just a game to him. The silence that followed was suffocating. Sophie stared at Noah, confusion and hurt flickering across her face. Is that true? Noah's throat felt tight. But she was already shaking her head, stepping back like he was a stranger. How long were you planning to lie to me? It wasn't, he stopped himself. It was a lie. No matter how much he wanted to believe otherwise, Sophie let out a hollow laugh. Wow, and here I thought you were different. The look in her eyes shattered something inside him. Ryan clapped him on the shoulder. Come on, Noah, time to go. For the first time in his life, Noah didn't want to leave, but Sophie had already turned away, and he had no idea how to fix it. Noah had made a lot of mistakes in his life, but watching Sophie walk away from him hurt more than any of them. He had spent years surrounded by people who only saw his wealth, who valued him for his last name instead of the man he was. And then Sophie had come along, kind, genuine, completely unaware of the world he came from, and he had ruined it. The cafe felt colder without her warmth, the city louder without her laughter. He tried calling, texting, showing up at the cafe, but she wouldn't even look at him. He had never cared about winning the bet. But now, standing in the penthouse he once called home, surrounded by luxury that felt meaningless, he realized what he had truly lost. Sophie. Ryan leaned against the bar, swirling a glass of whiskey. You look like hell. Noah ignored him, staring out at the skyline. She won't talk to me, Ryan sighed. You lied to her, Noah. What did you expect? Flowers and a thank you card. Noah ran a hand through his hair. I didn't mean to lie, I didn't know how to tell her without ruining everything. Ryan scoffed. And look how well that turned out. Noah clenched his fists. I have to fix this. Ryan studied him for a long moment before setting down his drink. Then stop sulking and do something about it. Noah had spent his life throwing money at problems, fixing things with a checkbook, but Sophie didn't care about money. She cared about honesty. About trust. And he had to prove to her that he was more than just a billionaire with a guilty conscience. The next morning, he found himself standing outside the cafe again. Sophie was inside, kneading dough with sharp, deliberate movements. She looked tired, her shoulders tense, her usual spark dimmed. He took a breath and walked in. She didn't look up. We're closed. I'm not here for coffee, he said softly. She slammed the dough onto the counter. Then what do you want? I want to talk. She finally looked at him, eyes hard. You mean lie, because you're pretty good at that. Noah exhaled. I never lied about how I felt about you. She let out a hollow laugh. Right. Because relationships built on deception are so romantic. I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid that if you knew the truth, you'd treat me like everyone else does. Like I was nothing more than a name and a bank account. She crossed her arms. So instead, you let me believe you were struggling. That you were just some guy trying to get by. I was struggling, he said quietly. Not with money, but with who I am, with what matters. And then I met you, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't just Noah Carter, billionaire heir, I was just me. Sophie's jaw tightened. You don't get to make this about you. I know, he said, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to know that what I felt, what I feel, it's real. She stared at him for a long moment, something unreadable in her eyes, then she turned back to her dough. Go home, Noah. His chest tightened. Sophie. She shook her head. I can't do this, I can't be someone's lesson. Noah swallowed hard. He had planned to fight, to say something that would make her believe him. But looking at her now, he realized that no words would be enough. She needed more than apologies. She needed proof. And he was going to give it to her. Noah had never fought for anything in his life, not really. Things had always come easily: money, power, success. But Sophie wasn't something he could buy or charm his way back into. She deserved more, so he spent the next few weeks proving it. At first, she ignored him. When he showed up at the cafe, she barely glanced his way. When he sent messages, they remained unanswered. But Noah wasn't giving up. He didn't try to win her over with grand gestures or expensive gifts. Instead, he showed up in ways that mattered. When the cafe had a morning rush and she was overwhelmed, he jumped behind the counter and helped, even when she scowled at him. When the espresso machine broke down again, he called in a repairman and covered the cost without telling her. When she worked late into the night, he waited outside just to make sure she got home safely. And slowly, ever so slowly, she started to soften. One evening, as she wiped down the counters, she finally sighed and looked at him. "Why are you still here?" Noah met her gaze, his voice steady. "Because I love you." Her hands stilled. "I know I messed up, I know I hurt you, but that doesn't change the way I feel." He took a step closer, his heart hammering. "You once told me that dreams don't pay rent, but they should. And yours should never have to wait." She frowned. "What are you talking about?" Noah reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. He hesitated for a moment, then set them gently on the counter. "It's yours," he said. She stared at the keys, then back at him, confusion flickering in her eyes. "What?" "The bakery." "Your bakery?" Sophie's breath hitched. "Noah, it's not a handout," he said quickly. "It's an investment in you, in your dream. I found a space, bigger, better equipment, everything you need. And I know you don't need me to save you, but you deserve this, Sophie, and I want to help you the way you helped me." She looked down at the keys, her fingers trembling as she reached for them. You did this for me," Noah swallowed hard. "I did this because I believe in you, because I love you, and because losing you was the worst thing that's ever happened to me." Sophie's eyes shimmered with something he couldn't quite place. Then, without warning, she closed the distance between them and kissed him. It wasn't soft or hesitant, it was desperate, raw, filled with all the things neither of them had been able to say. Noah wrapped his arms around her, pulling her flush against him, pouring every ounce of his love, his regret, his devotion into that kiss. When she finally pulled away, her forehead resting against his, she whispered, "I hate that I love you." He smiled against her lips. "I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you don't regret it." And as she kissed him again, he knew he finally had everything he had ever wanted. Sophie's hands trembled as she turned the keys over in her palm, her heart pounding louder than the hum of the city outside. She had spent so long dreaming of this moment, of a space to call her own, of a kitchen filled with the scent of fresh pastries, of customers lining up for something she had created with her own hands. And now Noah had given it to her. It should have scared her, the enormity of it all. But as she looked into his eyes, filled with nothing but sincerity and love, fear was the last thing she felt. Noah reached for her hand, his touch warm and steady. "Say something." She exhaled shakily, gripping the keys tighter. "I don't know what to say." A small smile tugged at his lips. "A thank you would be nice." She let out a breathless laugh, tears stinging her eyes. "Thank you." His fingers brushed her cheek, wiping away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "You don't have to decide anything right now. Just know that this is yours. No strings, no expectations. Just you chasing your dream." Sophie searched his face, looking for any trace of the smooth, talking billionaire she had once thought him to be, but he wasn't that man anymore. He was just Noah, the man who had spent weeks proving himself, the man who had fought for her, the man who had given her more than she had ever dared to hope for. And she loved him for it. She stepped closer, resting a hand against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. "You really did all of this for me." His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against him. "I'd do anything for you." The truth in his voice was enough to steal her breath away. She tilted her head up, brushing her lips against his, slow and lingering, savoring the moment. He responded instantly, deepening the kiss, his fingers threading through her hair as if he never wanted to let go. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't want him to. The new bakery space was everything she had ever wanted. Noah had spared no expense, but it wasn't the extravagance that made her heart race, it was the thoughtfulness behind every detail. The large open kitchen, the state-of-the-art ovens, the cozy seating area filled with warm lighting and rustic wooden tables. It felt like home, and Noah had made it happen. She stood in the middle of the empty space, turning in a slow circle, taking it all in. "It's perfect." Noah leaned against the doorframe, watching her with an affectionate smile. "It will be once you make it yours." She turned to him, her heart full to the brim. "I can't believe this is real." He walked toward her, stopping just inches away. "Believe it," she smiled, wrapping her arms around his neck. "You know, I'm not used to people fighting for me." His expression turned serious. "Then get used to it." "Because I'm not going anywhere." Her breath hitched, emotions swirling inside her. She had spent so long standing on her own, never expecting anyone to catch her if she fell. But Noah had changed everything. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid to fall. Months passed in a blur of flour-dusted countertops, late-night recipe testing, and stolen kisses in between batches of croissants. The bakery opened to overwhelming success, lines forming down the block as word spread of Sophie's creations. She poured every ounce of herself into the space, and it thrived because of it. And through it all, Noah was there. He became a fixture in her life, showing up every morning before the sun rose to help with prep, sneaking bites of pastries when he thought she wasn't looking, stealing moments with her when the chaos of the day settled. She had never known a love like this, steady, unwavering, built on truth and redemption. One evening, after closing up, they sat together in the dimly lit bakery, sharing a plate of leftover chocolate croissants. Sophie leaned her head against Noah's shoulder, sighing contentedly. "I never thought I'd have this." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "You built this, you made it happen." She tilted her head to look at him. "No, Noah." "We did." A slow smile spread across his face, his fingers lacing through hers. "Then let's keep building." Her heart swelled, and as she kissed him, she knew this was only the beginning.